Hello, this is Phil Goddard, Monument Beach resident and local producer on Bourne Community Access Television. I'm here today on Earth Day, April 22nd, 2014, to introduce a video that you're about to see, which is the 25th anniversary of the Integrated Solid Waste Management System in the town of Bourne, which is a sequel to a video that I shot as a member of the Recycling Committee in 1990 and 1992. I did some videos back then. It was my introduction to video production and editing with local producers. And back then it was hair and cable, and it's changed hands many times. And now I'm proud to say that the town residents here own their own community access television, BC TV, and I'm very proud to be part of that and have been a producer for many years here. And I'm coming to you as an independent producer for this video, but I'm also your town employee, and I happen to work at the Integrated Solid Waste Management Department. And this video is really a retrospective and also an update as to where we've come since those early days in the Recycling Committee in the early 90s, and how the town, through the efforts of many, many people, have brought to the town what you see now. All the operations and the potential for the future, well beyond the life of just the landfill, but really a site that could be around for many, many years to come. So as an introduction to the video you're about to see in a moment, I wanted to make sure that folks knew where to get more information about what the department does, the Integrated Solid Waste Management Department. That's www.townofbourne.com. Go onto that website, go under departments, and the Integrated Solid Waste Management website is on there. It has lots of information, historical information about presentations in detail about how we formed our business model, where we're going, and so forth. Lots of great information. I hope you check that out. At this point, I wanted to thank a lot of folks that have been part of this journey. For me personally, professionally, in 1989, I joined the Recycling Committee during its foundational years, when I read an article in the local Bourne Enterprise that asked for volunteers. A young person right out of college looking to supplement my business career and really wanted to get into the environmental world, and saw the Recycling Committee as a way to start to do that. And it really changed my life, and I thank all the members of the Recycling Committee back in those days for helping me out with that. It's been a real journey for me personally, and it's been a lot of fun. And I wanted to make sure that folks knew all the folks that are involved in back in the early days and the evolution of recycling and the creation of the department, which is a fully separate enterprise fund from the town general fund, and all the boards and folks that are involved. And so I want to take a few moments to do that so that you know, when you see the video of all the operations coming up, all that's really behind it, and folks that are out there today doing their best to work for you for now and in the future generations. And it's apropos that I'm taping this on Earth Day, 2014. So right now I wanted to let you know the folks at the ISWIM department that make this happen every day. My boss, Dan Barrett, the general manager, who was the operations manager for many years and now is the general manager, oversees all the operations out there. Certainly what goes on out there could not be accomplished without his leadership. My colleague also on the department is Asa Mintz, the operations manager, who was a contractor and engineer for one of our lining projects, who came on board about 2 years ago and runs the operations and is also working on the DPW building site, as ISWIM is contributing to the funding and operations and building, I should say, of that new DPW site as we make way for future landfill expansion. So that's Asa Mintz, the operations manager. My role is the manager of facility compliance and technology development. So I work on things like permitting and technology development, as you'll see in the video. Also at the office is Paula Coulombe, the assistant coordinator for finance and recycling. She sells the recyclables you'll see baled at our baling building, and Jane Hensey, the secretary, as well as our crew chiefs that really play an integral role in the day-to-day operations of the facilities out there as well, of course. Sal Barbetto, who's the landfill crew chief. Roy Morse is the mechanics crew chief. He keeps all that heavy equipment going. And Errol Campbell, who oversees the residential recycling center and the baling facility. So we could not do that without them, all the management team, obviously. and all the support staff. There are many here that I don't have time to mention, but are out there every day, 7 days a week in the summer and 6 days a week in the off season at the recycling center and around the site, taking care of business every day. And thank you to all the current and past ISWM employees. And I should mention some notable folks over the years. Brent Goins was the general manager for 9 years, was a consultant with me during the permitting days of the department and the site operation. Thank you to Brent Goins. Director of Business Services, Troy Clarkson. You'll see both of them in the videos coming up, as well as you'll see Dan and others I mentioned here. Account Clerk Paul Pacheco, and our first recycling coordinator, Jimmy Boyle, who now is a crew chief at the DPW, and was also instrumental in the early days of recycling in the town of Bourne. Of course, our town administrator, Tom Garino, who's been with us now for, I think, pushing 8 years, and his predecessor, Bill Griffin. These are the town administrators that were a result of the charter change in 2000 and have been part of the creation of where we are now and where we are going in the future. Town Council Bob Troy has also played an integral role in our contracts and overviewing procurement matters for us. He's been town council for many, many years. The Board of Selectmen over the years, there have been many, many players, of course. Notably, I want to mention the early days and the recycling committee days. Marie Oliva, whom you'll see in the video here, and Bob Parody, who's our town moderator, was a selectman at the time. Were very supportive in the early days of recycling, and recycling was, again, fundamental to the creation of ISWM later. Also notable during the creation of ISWM in the mid-90s when we transitioned the landfill to a modern facility. Of course, Roland DuPont, Hayden Cogsall, and Tommy Barlow also were integral in as full-time selectmen right at the end of the tenure of the full-time selectman form of government that we had. Can't forget those gentlemen as well. The Board of Health, we could not do this without the Board of Health over the years under the leadership of Steve McNally for many, many years. I think almost 20 years he was the chairman. Absolutely integral in the creation of ISWM, and the current chairperson, Kathy Peterson, and all the longtime members of the Board of Health, Stanley Andrews, Don Udy, and Skip Barlow, all work with us hand in glove, but also have been with us through some tough times financially and when we had odors at the facility, and have stuck with us through thick and thin. And thank you to the Board of Health, who will play an integral role as we go forward with future projects, and potentially leasing parts of the site to other operations such as anaerobic digestion, looking out for human health and the environment, protecting it all, and managing odors. Thank you to the Board of Health. To the Director of the Health Department, Cindy Coffin, who has been a long-time employee of the town of Bourne, and her father actually helped me in early days on videotaping presentations for the Board of Health. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the working group with whom ISWM works currently, and that was a group formed by the Selectman John Ford recently, about 4 years ago. The Chairman, Don Picard, represents the Board of Selectmen, Stanley Andrews, the Board of Health, John Redmond from the Finance Committee, Bill Ware from the Capital Outlay, and Bob Schofield from the Energy Advisory Committee. This group works on our business model to help chart the course to profitability and sustainability for the operations, and they have played an absolute vital role in providing the staff, Dan, myself, and our consultants a venue which to really talk about these issues in depth, and we can't thank them enough. And they were integral in the RFP process we did recently. The Recycling Committee in the foundational days, Pam Olson, whom you'll see, Sue Carpenter, Kurt Tykert, Alan McKay, Dave Christensen, Dave Malarski, Jack Elwood, Roger Kemp, Kathy and Ned Harrington helped me with the original video that you'll see, I should say, and the dozens of village volunteers around the town that helped us in the early days distribute bins and brochures. And interestingly, as I learned a few days ago at the Selectmen's meeting, Linda Zern, who's a Selectwoman now, was one of those original volunteers 25 years ago on paper drives. You never know how things come back to you. It's quite interesting. The current Recycling Committee, of course, under the leadership of Meredith Chase, Betty Stoidel, and Heather DiPaolo, who work on events now, including our Earth Day. You, the town meeting voters out there and the residents of Bourne, of course, thank you. And want to mention one more time, go to townofbourne.com for more information. My name is Phil Goddard. Sit back and enjoy the video. And thank you again to Bourne Community Television for helping me produce this, Elaine Orfanos for her many hours of editing, and to Dick Anderson for studio management. Thank you and enjoy the video. Hello, my name is Phil Goddard and welcome to the 25th anniversary edition of Integrated Solid Waste Management in Bourne. Believe it or not, we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of recycling and composting in the town of Bourne, which began in April 1989. And 24 years ago, as a member of the recycling committee, I was one of the original members in 1989, joined in the summer. In this very studio, I prepared a video with help of Ned and Kathy Harrington that showed clips of what we do for recycling in the town of Bourne and what the landfill looked like. And what I thought I'd do for the 25th anniversary is to take you through where we've been since then. It's been quite a change. I'm speaking to you on April 15th, 2014. The video I shot was from about a month ago in March, and we have other highlights over the years of how the site has changed dramatically since 1989 and how some of the things we were talking about originally have come to fruition, and we have much more to do and learn and grow. And first off, I want to just thank you, the recycler and citizen of the town of Bourne, for participating all these years. The program would not be a success without your participation and votes at town meeting to create what eventually became an enterprise fund and standalone department that was way beyond anything we had envisioned back in the early days. I'd like to speak just for a moment about how this all began in 1988, or the origins of all that we're doing here. And to do that, I'd like to introduce Pam Olson, and in her own words, she can tell you how she led the way on forming the recycling committee because of a situation that she encountered at the facility in 1988. So let's go to that video clip now.
Happy 25th, and I'd like to take a moment to tell the story of how things got started back 25 years ago. And it's interesting how a simple act can lead to a greater impact, but you don't really understand that till you do look back. And it was the summer of 1988, actually the end of the summer. My husband, Rob, came up to the landfill, which had a drop-off recycling area for glass. And he was bringing our glass up for recycling. And he came home with the same box of glass, and I said, "Why are you back here with the glass?" And apparently, when he was at the landfill, he found out that the glass was not going to be recycled. And needless to say, I was not happy with that answer. And I started to do some research and talked to Louis Pellegrini at the time, who was the highway surveyor and manager of the landfill. And he told me that the glass often got contaminated and could not be recycled, and that there was difficulty finding markets for recycling of glass at that time. So I wrote a letter to the Selectman Oliva at the time, and stated my concerns and disappointment that we were supposed to be able to recycle glass and could not. So that was the summer of 1988, and that then led to a conversation with Selectman Oliva, and she listened to what I had to say, and this moved forward to creating a task force by the selectmen and initiating the Compost and Recycling Committee task force, which met for the first time in April 1989. So it's interesting how a simple action then led to a greater action. And at the time, I was a mother of two young boys, ages 5 and 1, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and this became my work. I decided to educate myself about what was going on with recycling in the state and the area, and become a learner of this information about solid waste. The task force committee, when it first met, was comprised of several other resident volunteers and Board of Health members and health agent Cynthia Coffin, the highway surveyor Louis Pellegrini, and Selectman Oliva. And this task force was really full of people who were committed to taking information and applying it to the town and advising the selectmen about solid waste issues and how the town could move forward in solving problems. And I have a great respect for those fellow members of the committee because we really worked well together. And our first goal was to get leaves out of the landfill. The overarching goal was to get as many materials out of the landfill because we knew it had potential end life. At that time, it was said to be 20 years. So it's very interesting now looking back to see that the landfill is still in operation, and much of what we aimed to do has come to fruition through our actions.
Welcome back. Was that a great story? That is a prime example of citizen activism leading to direct action and implementation. And of course, the selectmen said, what a great idea. Congratulations, you're now the chairperson of that committee. Good luck. And they were very supportive. And I need to recognize that the Board of Selectmen, who at that time were a full-time Board of Selectmen, meaning that each individual selectman that was elected was a full-time employee that actually ran the town. There was not a part-time board or a town administrator. That was the form of government that we had back in those days, and it was very much a direct form of government in terms of the elected officials actually ran the day-to-day operations of the town. Quite fascinating, very interesting how this all began, and two of the members of that board were very instrumental in leading the way in the early days, and Selectwoman Maria Oliva, who's now the director at the Canal Area Chamber of Commerce, was instrumental in taking us under her wing and arranging for markets and material and promotion and just giving us a lot of support. And we'll have a video clip showing Marie in the early days as well. Bob Parody was a selectman at the time, was very supportive. Tommy Barlow in the early days. Hayden Cogsall, Roland DuPont played a role in behind the scenes, but then as a selectman with Hayden and Tommy Barlow really created the department that is in charge of the landfill now and the recycling center, and that department is the Integrated Solid Waste Management Department, which is a completely separately funded operation from revenues coming into the facilities, completely separate from your tax base, and in fact pays for all your curbside recycling and trash collection, as well as contributes hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash from host fees that we pay to the town general fund. And I say we, yes, I am an employee of the town of Bourne now. 24 years later, I'm the manager of facility compliance and technology development at the Department of Integrated Solid Waste Management. So this has had a personal effect on me, changed the course of my career in my life, and I live here in Monument Beach and now work for you, the taxpayers, to make this site not only functional, revenue positive to the town, to the tune of approximately $2 million a year in avoided costs in cash, but also to be innovative and support our environmental mission, which is to provide a safe and practical means for recycling and diverting materials from disposal, and to dispose of those items we do dispose of in a safe manner. So there's more to come. We're going to have a lot of fun here. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the history of the department, and also a tour through the current setup that we have out there and show you what it looked like before, contrasted with what is out there now. If you haven't been down there in recent years, it has changed dramatically. We've excavated an old unlined landfill and reconfigured our entrance and new recycling center, all of which have been paid for out of the enterprise fund. So let's take a little moment here, though. I want to just show you some greetings of folks that I videotaped recently, just wishing a happy 25th anniversary to the town of Bourne for its efforts. And we have a few folks that want to say hello, including the recycling committee, Barnstable County staff, And so let's take a look at those clips right now.
Hello, my name is Meredith Chase, and I'm chairwoman of the Bourne Recycling Committee for many years. And it is exciting that the Recycling Committee is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and I hope that everybody can help celebrate with us.
Hi, I'm Betty Stoidel. I have not been on the committee as long as Meredith, but I have really enjoyed it. I think it's, I do write an article for the newspaper from time to time on recycling, Bourne Recycles, and it leads me to read some interesting progress of various people, committees, and institutions. So a lot has been done over the years by the previous recycling committee, but there's always more to do.
And I'm Heather DiPaolo. I've been a member for almost 3 years. I am excited that I'm on this committee. I was a recycler. I lived in Seattle for a while and came here and was telling them all about the recycling that we did out there, which is, of course, you know, the West Coast is more progressive, but we're getting there. And I have to say, talk about the difference between when growing up here, I would bundle my newspapers with my dad, and then he would bring them down to the recycling area. So my goodness, and now my husband comes and he just, you know, is able to do it so easily. So I really am impressed with all that's happened in the last 25 years. So congratulations to the recycling committee, and I'm happy to be part of it. In the future, I go into the schools, so I get to, you know, help educate the youth and bring forward a new generation. So this is wonderful.
Hi, this is Mike McGuire from Barnstable County. I work with the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension, and this is Calliope Egloff with me. She's also with the Extension. We provide difficult to manage and hazardous waste services to the residents of Cape Cod on behalf of the County of Barnstable. We're here today to wish Bourne Integrated Solid Waste Management Facility a happy 25th anniversary. And Phil and Calliope and I were just discussing how long a road it's been and how far we've come in solid waste management. So when Phil and others started the Bourne Integrated Solid Waste Management Facility 25 years ago, there wasn't a hazardous waste collection on the Cape. We weren't doing anything with sharps or flares or mercury collection. We weren't dealing with unwanted medication collection. And a lot has changed.
Happy 25th, Bourne.
AmeriCorps says happy 25th!
Well, isn't that nice? And in that video that we just showed you were two young ladies from AmeriCorps painting a mural on the side of our transfer station, and I'll explain what that transfer station is for in the coming parts of the video here. But we're trying to beautify the site as we go along. It really has been a huge transformation out there, and you'll see that as we go through and take the virtual tour. Of course, every Earth Day, including April 19th of this year, that weekend we celebrate Earth Day at the facility by providing tours to residents who'd like to come in and take a bus ride, if you will, on an old Council on Aging bus around the site, where I provide a tour and tell you the history of the site, what the operations are being undertaken at the current time, what the various equipment is out there, and what our plans are for the future. I've been doing this for now 14 years. It's a lot of fun. Those that come on the tour really are fascinated with what goes on down there and have a behind-the-scenes look that most people don't get to see. So I encourage you to do that if you haven't. If you can't make it on Earth Day, you can always give us a call at 508-759-0651 to arrange for a separate tour. And we do school presentations, the middle school, and have other folks come out time to time. I should also mention, before we get a little bit further into the background here, that the department does have a website that's part of the Town of Bourne's website at www.townofbourne.com. And then you go to the Department of Integrated Solid Waste Management, and there is our page where there's lots of useful information about how you can recycle, what products you can divert from disposal, bring to it household hazardous waste collection, rain barrel information, paint shed information, but also a lot of useful documents if you want to know more about the history of the facility. In the bottom right hand corner under useful documents on the page are a lot of presentations and reports that talk about our business plans, which I'll be discussing in a little more in depth later in the DVD, that discuss how we got to where we are and how we plan for the future. A lot of work goes in behind the scenes in creating what you see out there and what will come down the road later on. This is a $13 million operation in gross revenues in FY13. And as I mentioned earlier, we contribute about $2 million in avoided costs, which are through paying for your curbside collection, as well as host fees that we pay to the general fund per year. And that adds up over time. And that roughly is about an override. I would look at it in those terms, to keep your taxes low and to provide the services. And the recycling center at a reduced rate. So a lot's been going on out there, and it's our pleasure at the department to work on these items for you. It's a passion for us. It's something that we take great pride in doing and enjoy working with the residents of the town to do what is right. And we all have lots of stuff to deal with every day. I know that I have to clean out my stuff every once in a while, old clothes and an old computer. These are things now that we can recycle that we weren't doing 25 years ago on a regular basis. So let me take you through just a brief update of how we progressed since 1989 to 2014. Some of you may not know the history of how this all occurred. So I thought I'd give you a few minutes of background with some timeline milestones that take you to the present day before I get into the virtual tour and tell you about the various sites at the facility, and we'll see the clips of the old and the new. Back in 1967, the town, in the late 60s at that time, was landfilling across the street at what is now the Brookside Golf Club and next to the Toyota dealership. Believe it or not, if you go up to the driving range, you'll see a white pipe with a macaroni-shaped vent, and that is to vent landfill gas from the old town dump that was built out there, upon which they built part of the golf course. Now they capped it and sealed it, and they had to do a lot of work, but back in the 60s that was the landfill. As that became full, the town needed a new site, and they looked across the street on MacArthur Boulevard to some woodlots that were there at the current location, and they purchased that site and occupied it with a new DPW building that Louis Pellegrini, the former highway surveyor and DPW superintendent, built for the town under the town's direction, and that was done in January 1967. That site became the foundation of what we have today, and my understanding from what I've been told is that the hole that was created for what is now used for landfilling, a lot of which was created when gravel was removed and brought to the Mass Maritime Academy for Phil to create more land mass for the expansion out at the Mass Maritime Academy over at Buzzards Bay. So there's a nice story there in terms of what was removed was used to build something constructive, which is a really nice tie-in. And of course Mass Maritime has grown substantially since the 60s and now is involved in all sorts of environmental issues, which is a nice postscript to what is going on. So back in the 67, the town purchased that site, and much like every other town in the Massachusetts area in New England, you had essentially an unlined town dump, a hole in the ground with no leachate collection, which is the liquids that flow through waste, no gas collection. It was simply trash was dumped on the ground, much like every other municipality managed their materials, and then sand would be thrown on top or dirt to cover up what was done. There was really not a lot of compaction, not a lot of management. It was really a sideline for the DPW, which managed the roads as their primary function, plowing, road maintenance, and then the dump was a sideline, if you will. And that's the way we collectively as a society managed our materials in the 60s and even into the 90s, believe it or not. That became a problem later revealed in some cases from the military base and other landfills around the country, which, because they did not collect the liquids, water was allowed to flow underneath into the groundwater, and that's not what we want. Fortunately, in our case, we don't have a huge problem there. That unlined area has been capped, and all the liner systems are in place for a modern landfill to manage what we generate now, the double composite liner, which I'll talk about a little more in depth. And that pretty much was the way things went along in the 60s, in the 70s, into the late 80s when Pam Olson went down and said, how come you're not recycling? And the recycling committee was formed. We had a lot of excellent volunteers in the early days, but not a lot of money, and we had to really work hard to hand flyers out door to door, recycling bins door to door, recycle the newspapers by bundling them and offloading them to a trailer 15 tons at a time by hand over in Wareham to get paid any kind of money for it back in the days when you had to pay to get rid of recyclables, not get paid. And it really was a foundational change, a real fork in the road, I'll use that expression because we'll talk about it later, for the town. Most other landfills in the Cape, in fact, the towns decided to go with the waste energy facility in Rochester, Mass, where they incinerate the waste. They sent it over by rail or large transfer trailer to this facility. They'd burn the trash, created heat, which then was used to create steam, which was then used in a compressed form to drive a turbine to make electricity. And in doing so, all the towns closed their town dumps, except for Bourne. So Bourne was this vestige of landfilling on the Cape, mainly because we had low cost to operate it and a huge site that the other towns did not have. And that played a huge role in creating what later became the Integrated Solid Waste Management Department. And we have a role that we're playing with CMAS, which I'll talk about in a moment. That committee, by definition, worked on recycling, but also inevitably started looking at the landfill itself as regulations now had progressed since the 70s that required liners, gas collection, and other measures to continue to run a landfill. And the town had to make a decision whether they were going to run the town dump anymore or upgrade, if they were going to continue to run a landfill, to the modern standards, in which costs hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars per the new regulations. And most towns would say, no, we're just going to cap it and transfer our waste and let someone else manage it and have a transfer station like every other town on Cape Cod. Town of Bourne, to their credit, based on a lot of work and research, decided, no, we're going to do this. And the recycling committee was the origin of a lot of those studies. We shot some video. We went up to facilities in New Hampshire and looked at what they're doing. And the selectmen said, we're going to investigate this and we're going to go out and look at private companies to run it or the town forming a new department to run it. And eventually they chose to do it themselves. And the townspeople, voted in the mid-90s to create a new department dedicated to this operation, integrated solid waste management, not just the landfill, but everything, recycling and solid waste management, and dedicated the money and the expertise, hired staff, and did what most towns would not be willing to do, which is essentially create an entire new operation in a modern environmental operation at that, which is something that was not typically done by municipalities, especially a small town like the town of Bourne with 18,000, 20,000 people year round. The recycling committee was the origins of that, and when the DEPs looked at the town's permits and said, okay, we'll allow you to build this landfill, but they said modern facilities need to show and demonstrate that they're recycling. And because Bourne had a great recycling program, it was already doing what the state wanted, the state said, okay, you could build a disposal facility. So right there, had we not recycled, we would not have been able to build a new modern landfill because the state did not want the landfill to become the first choice for recycling. They wanted that diverted. And Bourne, having foresight, did the right thing. And so when I tell people that the recycling committee and recycling was the foundation of everything they see out there today, it is absolutely true. And without that committee doing what it did in the early days, we would not be here today. There's a lot of folks involved in the story in the last 25 years, but I wanted to make that point so you understand how important diversion and recycling has become. I use that word diversion because not everything gets recycled. It gets diverted to other areas such as composting and possibly energy, which is developing more and more in the industry these days for new options. So that is a point I wanted to make. Now, as we progressed into the late 90s, the town decided we're going to build this new landfill, but we're going to do it only for stuff other than your household trash. And they said, let's do recycling of construction demolition materials, and then we'll deposit in the landfill those hard to manage recyclable, not recyclable items like old nets and soils that have light contamination in them that meet requirements and other things like that. And they started processing and transferring, processing and disposing of construction demolition debris, but then they signed a 10-year contract with the CMAS Waste Energy Facility, bought into the transfer station on the military reservation, Mass Military Reservation, which is now Joint Base Cape Cod, where Falmouth, Mashpee, and Sandwich were rail hauling their trash, the trash train, to CMAS. We bought into that and participated for 10 years while we looked at a model that would have us recycle construction demolition debris. Now, what is that? That is your old deck, that is materials from building a home, other than household trash. The market had changed during all of that, and the state required us to build a building to build a processing facility, and which was going to be much more expensive than processing it outside and disposing of it. Subsequently, they banned the disposal of wood. So what the town decided to do was, we are going to transfer that in a new building, which I'll show you in the video clips, you'll see, to other processors. And we looked at the market and we decided that it wasn't for us to invest that much money. So we started taking trash back in again in the late 2005 range and investigated other options for where we're going to go in the future, including taking the residual ash from CMAS, which we'll see and talk about that in a little bit. The reason I tell you all these details is to give you some insight as to how things change. And when Bourne decided to run the facility, it entered a competitive marketplace. No longer were we just managing our own materials, but we were managing the materials of customers that came to our facility and paid us, commercial customers from the local restaurant or hauling companies that bring in materials from other towns. So we were now in a competitive environment competing directly with the CMAS or other disposal facilities. So it was a watershed moment. So we had to have a business plan because we were completely self-sufficient financially, did not raise taxes to pay for what we were doing there. So along the way, lots of meetings had to occur, and all the players were involved in those meetings, including you at town meeting, the Bourne Board of Health, which has a very important statutory role overseeing the facility, the Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, Capital Outlay, and the Energy Advisory Committee, which is a newly formed committee looking at possible uses out there for energy on the site. All of these players had a role, including the regional players like the Cape Cod Commission, and of course DEP and MEPA, which is a unit of the state as well, looking at the broader environmental aspects of any project we do out there. Lots of engineering, lots of regulations that govern us right now. So as we wander around the site later in the video, you'll see all of the different systems that are in place to meet those regulations. But the business planning and how we move forward is something that most towns were not accustomed to doing. But because we are funded through the revenue of the gate, the customers over the gate, we had to have a business model. And that is something that requires a lot of thought and investigation. And so over the time, as the facility grew, we had to adjust to market conditions. The economy had a huge hit in 2008 2009, and we had to evaluate where we're going in the future. By that time, we had built a baling facility to take recyclables that you provide to the town and bale them and compress them and sell them on open markets and get paid for that. We had developed a brand new recycling center, which hopefully you've been out to see, which you'll see some video of, which is the pride of our site there. Folks love coming there and going to Dorothy's Swap Shop. We built the C&D transfer station, which I mentioned earlier. We had management systems for environmental controls, all worth millions and millions of dollars, and this requires a lot of planning. And I should mention that the staff in the town does not do this alone. We hire consultants to help us, most notably in the early days, Dick Keller, who was an engineer for the town for many, many years. Jeff Rose was on the recycling committee and helped us back in the early days. You'll see them in a video. John Merritt was in a video, worked from DEP in the early days, but then joined us as a consultant. CGK, from which we got one of our general managers, Brent Goins, whom you'll see, and George Aronson of Commonwealth Resource Management Corp. These are folks who have been very involved in our RFP request for proposals about where we're going in the future. These folks have all played a role, along with the many, many selectmen over the years in the recycling committee, to help create a vision for the future. And that's very, very important that you understand that it's not done in a vacuum. There are many folks that contribute to this. And we have some video clips that I'd like to show you now of some of those meetings over the years. A few minutes of various bits and tidbits of public presentations. This was done in a very open and transparent way to educate the public about why we were asking you to consider what we were asking, and giving you some feedback and getting your feedback. So take a moment now just to look at some of these highlights from various presentations over the various last 15 years or so.
Welcome, my name is Phil Goddard. I'm also a member of the Recycling and Composting Committee. And as you can see, we're located on a busy highway. This is the entrance to the Bourne landfill, located on the northbound side. Here we are at the composting area. As you can see, we have the leaf composting, and we also have a Christmas tree mulching program that's in place right now. How's it going so far, Lou?
So far it's been going very, very good.
My name is Pamela Olson. I'm a member of the Composting and Recycling Committee, and I'm currently serving as chairman. This video is part of our public education program to help Bourne residents understand our goals.
First, I'd like to talk to you about glass. There are several things to look for when you're cleaning up glass.
We have some guest speakers that are here tonight with us. We plan to allow them to do a presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers.
And of course, my name is Roland DuPont, and I have the privilege of also serving as a member of the Board of Selectmen and have been working on this project since 1994. What I'd like to do a little bit is give a current update as to what is going on at the landfill.
And I'm sure this will be an informative presentation, and there will be opportunity for questions, I believe. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn the meeting over to our town administrator, Bill Griffin.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you for coming, and thank you for taking the time to read the report. As I know,
I'm Brent Goins, the general manager. Dan Barrett hasn't quite made it here yet, but over here we have Troy Clarkson, who is our new Director of Business Services. Phil Goddard, who is the Environmental Manager. And Jimmy Boyle out here, who is...
You look down the road, you can see CMAS. I mean, we keep saying CMAS, but it's kind of a natural fit, at least for us to discuss these issues with CMAS.
The projected budget for the 3.5 years of the Phase 6 operation included $48 million $289,500 in revenue.
I think this is a wonderful new chapter of the Residential Recycling Center. And I remember the beginning chapter because my husband came to recycle some glass. No matter what you've done in life or what you owned in life, sometimes it's how you volunteer that makes the most impression and has a lasting effect.
It's really interesting to see those clips. Sadly, Roland DuPont, who was featured in a couple of those clips, passed away a few years ago. We have a tree dedicated in his memory as a real driving force in the creation of Integrated Solid Waste Management Department back in the mid-90s. Roland was a real ardent environmentalist and participated in the county as a commissioner and as a selectman for many years, and was integral in creating iSwim. And we've dedicated a tree to him on the outbound road at the recycling center. So next time you're out there, take a quick look. There's a little plaque there. And it's just fun to look back at some of the players over the years. So I hope you enjoyed that. Just to continue with the story of development projects, in 2009, like everybody else, we lost a lot of business because of the economy. And that really required the town to come together, the leadership, and look at where do we go from here? What kind of landfill do we want? What do we want to do with the rest of the site? Because we had bought 25 acres in 2001, had it site assigned for managing materials other than landfilling or incineration through the Board of Health approval process called site assignment. And that 25 acres is really for lack of a better phrase, an industrial park that we can do things on beyond the life of the landfill. So what could we do with that 100-acre site out there? And this is what was posed to all of us, including all the leadership. And there's on our website a study that was done by an outside engineering firm that we worked with that talked about changes in the department and things we needed to look at. But there are a lot of meetings that we had about what do we need to do with the site. And there were two avenues to explore. And my boss, Dan Barrett, the general manager, was integral in creating that 5-year plan. What do we do with the landfill? That's our anchor store, as we called it. That was the revenue generator, but we needed to have a plan. Which way are we going to go? Are we going to be a residuals landfill, or dirt, taking ash from CMAS, inert materials, or are we going to continue to try to compete for municipal solid waste up against CMAS? And at that point in time, the contracts for the Cape Towns that were signed back in the late 80s were coming due actually at the end of this calendar year. This is how far out in advance you have to plan, 5 years. Ultimately, it was decided to go with taking ash, and we have now signed a 10-year contract with Covanta, and beginning in 2015, we will be taking virtually all of our incoming acceptable permitted tonnage as residual ash, bottom and fly ash, mixed together, which is inert material, and it's a steady stream, predictable financially, predictable in terms of homogeneity of material, and we know what it is every day. It's easier to manage, less litter. The birds don't like to eat it. It doesn't smell. It's really a different type of operation, and that's where we're going to be moving forward. We will be taking our own material from the town in the landfill. I should mention, when the 10-year contract with CMAS expired in 2006, we started taking our own trash again. We signed a 10-year contract with the town of Falmouth for their MSW, and a little bit we left over for what we call the spot market. People would come in without contracts. Also, phase 2 of that was, what are we going to do with the rest of the site to make money for the town that would pay for all the services and the subsidized sticker at the recycling center? If you check your neighbors in Falmouth or Sandwich or Barnstable what the stickers cost, they're way more expensive than what we charge. We subsidize that, and that's something we're happy to do. But phase 2 was, what do we do with the site to continue those services, pay for all of our equipment, cap the landfill properly, do all the management systems beyond the life of the landfill. Eventually it will be closed. And that is an important question. So I'll explain that story in just a moment, but I wanted to finish explaining that when we signed that contract with Covanta, it also included a 20-year disposal agreement that when our landfill closes, we have a 20-year agreement with them to take our trash at their incinerator at a extremely reduced rate beginning in the mid-2020s for 20 years. So it's really a 30-year deal that we did with Covanta CMAS. And that tip fee was the price to tip at their facility is equivalent to about $14 a ton now. Phenomenal when the rates are going into the 50s or 60s depending on when you signed up. So rest assured that your waste has a home for the next 30 years plus. So to address what are we going to do with that site out back, the 25 acres, the selectmen formed a group called the Landfill Business Model Working Group, consisting of a representative from the Board of Selectmen, Board of Health, Finance Committee, Energy Advisory Committee, a member at large who in this case happens to also be a member of the Capital Outlay Committee. And so there are five gentlemen that have lots of experience in guiding the staff, the professional staff, myself and General Manager Dan Barrett, and now we have an operations manager, Asa Mintz, about where we go in the future. And those five are Don Picard, who's a selectman, Stanley Andrews, the Board of Health, the Finance Committee representative is John Redmond, Bill Ware is from the Capital Outlay Committee, and the Energy Advisory Committee is Bob Schofield. Gentlemen who have worked in municipal government in varieties of ways as selectmen or volunteers and have significant business experience too. So we could sit with them for many hours at these meetings and really roll our sleeves up and look at the future. And what came out of that process was to put out 3 requests for proposals. One to manage our liquids, which is leachate management. What kind of equipment could we do? The second was, does anybody want our landfill gas, which is methane or natural gas, to build a power plant with and create electricity? And the third was, we have small acreage out back that's site assigned for managing solid waste in innovative ways in a building in 2 different parcels. Did somebody want to come in and do something innovative with that site as a lessee, whereby the town would be the lessor or landlord? What we got back in response was possibly using the gas from the flare to evaporate the leachate, but creating no energy, but reducing that amount of liquid we have to haul off site at great expense. Reverse osmosis, or cleaning up or filtering the leachate and having clean water left over. The second RFP, nobody responded. There wasn't enough gas. Our gas curve, which is what we use to predict the volume of gas over time, was too low to warrant someone coming in and spending the millions of dollars. So we got no responses, and plus the natural gas prices have come down, making that harder to justify financially. The third RFP, we received a project from Harvest Power, who wants to build an anaerobic digester on land, which I'll show you in the clips forthcoming, on about 4.5 acres, a anaerobic digester, which is a giant enclosed tank where food waste and biosolids, also known as sewage sludge, that we would take in, they would take in. They're responsible for building, operating, and financing and designing, but they would lease that acreage. Nothing has been signed, nothing has been permitted. This is what they proposed and the town is considering right now. That material would then digest without oxygen, which is different than composting, which uses oxygen and creates dirt, compost, or loam. We've been doing that for 25 years. Anaerobic digestion is without oxygen, and what happens in the landfill to create the gas? Different microbes break it down in the absence of oxygen, creating methane, which is natural gas, which can be run in an engine to create electricity. And this is great because the state is now looking to divert or ban the disposal of commercially generated food waste, and eventually it will probably come to the residents that food waste will be banned from being thrown in the landfill. So we're thinking ahead down the road. And that company would buy our landfill gas, combine it with their what's called biogas, again, the same gas, pipe it to a building with engines, big diesel engines that are converted to run on natural gas, which then will drive a generator to create several megawatts of electricity that would be green, renewable, and go into the grid. And that's what we're considering right now. And we would manage their liquids, and we're also simultaneously looking at, instead of someone else running treatment systems for the leachate, we're looking at treating that ourselves through a reverse osmosis process, taking the liquids from the digester plus our own leachate and treating it. And what's fascinating about that project that we're looking at is the clean, treated water. We are exploring piping that to infiltration basins managed by the 102nd Intelligence Wing on Joint Base Cape Cod, whose clean water from their sewage treatment plant is piped right next to those beds, right by our facility. We would connect in. So we may be actually partnering with the military on this operation. Lots of details that I could get into. If this were to occur, it's something that's quite exciting. The state has a lot of interest in seeing this happen. They've banned food waste, commercial food waste from disposal, and they're really encouraging anaerobic digestion with the production of green energy. So stay tuned to come on that. You'll see the site where we're looking to do that, lease that property to Harvest Power, should this project go forward. And I want to emphasize that while a lease is being looked at, eventually all this project and its components, odor protection and control, what they take and how they manage it, will all be reviewed by the Bourne Board of Health. And they will open through ISWIM, open that site assignment, and the Board of Health will have purview over what gets done on that parcel. So there's checks and balances between the financial side with the Board of Selectmen and the operations side and human health and the environment and nuisance conditions with the Board of Health, as well as other permitting agencies like Cape Cod Commission, MEPA, or the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. So stay tuned for that, exciting possibilities. That's where we are now. It's quite a bit of change since that video that was shot in 1990, where you see me where we were grinding Christmas trees and we had the old compactor in the landfill, and the beginnings of a recycling program has grown tremendously, and it's been a journey that has come a long way. What I will do now for you is show you a site tour. We're going to go to that video clip. I'll have a voiceover to tell you what those sites are. We'll take that video tour right now, and I'll be back for some final closing thoughts as we wrap up this 25th anniversary edition of Integrated Solid Waste Management and Bourne. Back in a few minutes. This is video footage shot in obviously 1990 with Ned Harrington driving into the entrance of, at that time, the Bourne landfill. It was really an unlined landfill, and as you can see on the left, lots of trees that aren't there now, and obviously the site is not as groomed and graded with paving as it is now. We're going to show a comparison of what this looks like to 2014 at the end of these clips here, which I think you'll appreciate. You're going to see that during these clips sequentially, but we do a side-by-side, which is a lot of fun. This is the old guard shack. Looks like there's some compost piles on the left there, but this is the old guard shack. And back in this day and age, you used to buy tickets, I believe, at Town Hall for items that you would bring in, and customers also would come in and pay by the cubic yard. We did not have a scale at the time, so it was very, very primitive type of situation. This is the same era, and this is coming down into the unlined landfill at the time, which we ended up calling Phase 1C. This is looking north towards the Monument Beach Sportsman's Club. Everything to your right would eventually be lined, double composite lined landfill. And you're going down into the area that stretches back to the early, or I should say, mid-1960s, 67 on, and was used until 1999 as a landfill. And then we went and did the liner in the back corner there, straight ahead, was the first lined area in 1999 with the new department, Integrated Solid Waste Management Department. So this was what we were trying to document at the time, where we were in use of the landfill, and a little bit of footage there. I had the privilege of flying with the Massachusetts Air National Guard in 2000 for my own TV show, and at the time I asked them to fly around the facility so I could get some footage to document a moment in time. What you just saw there was the 25 acres we bought and where the recycling center is located currently. But where that ends right there with the developed area is the original parcel. It's a 74-acre parcel with a lined landfill beginning in 1999. And in the upper left corner is the first lined area, as I mentioned. And what you're seeing in the bottom with all the lines, the contours, is the capped, unlined area that we saw from 10 years earlier. And this is the beginning of the Integrated Solid Waste Management Department era. You can see a lining project in progress as we come around looking southbound. You can see the layers of clay and plastic that are what a liner is made up of, modern liner. And for years we separated the lined area, which is right here where we're doing construction, demolition, processing. We weren't taking trash, household trash at that time. The plan was to process and eventually transfer or build a building to process construction, demolition debris, and the business model didn't work out. So we went back to taking trash, and we're going to be taking ash. But you can see the two separate areas. Eventually we connected those two. As time went on, we needed to find new areas to go into, but we did dig up a part of the landfill, which you'll see in subsequent video here. This is what a liner looks like. This is a shot from 2002, obviously. They're putting layers of flexible membrane liner there. That's 60 mil, or 61 thousandths of an inch, and the next to them was the clay. This area right here was all excavated. This is an old landfill, believe it or not. We drove over this for years. This is called Phase 1D. And this whole area, you'll see later in the video coming up, was all excavated to create the current lined landfill that we are using today. As we pan right here, you'll see the old recycling center, which was on top of trash from the 70s. There's old Dorothy's right in the center of the shot right now, and the textile recycling and the bins for the various recyclables. All of this has been replaced by the brand new recycling center that we all use today. What's interesting about this, again, it was over old trash, and part of the remediation and cleanup of the site was to remove this whole area that would have required a separate cap, but instead we removed it all together. This is the scale setup that was improved when and installed in the late 90s, and a second scale was built. You can see the new scale on the outbound side. All right, so here we are in modern footage in 2014, driving out, looking toward the gun club and Route 28. This is the new scale house. It's about 500 feet inbound from the highway to allow queuing areas. So here we are coming in, the entrance, 2014 again. Comparison to the shot you saw earlier. We'll have a side-by-side later so you get a view of it. Obviously, the height of the landfill has grown in the subsequent years, 25 years later, 24 years later. It gets filled in, and it is capped right there. We have a nice flagpole. And we've widened and paved everything, put lines down. On the left is where the old scales used to be, and we're approaching the new scale house complex, which with much better, more durable scales. On your left is the Phase 1D area that I mentioned earlier that we dug up, and we are literally driving over the old recycling center, and on your right you'll see netting that we use to contain litter that might blow on a windy day across the road so as not to go onto Route 28. That's the new scale house. It's a permanent scale house with heat and restroom for the operators. Very much improvement over before. This is a shot looking back north, coming into the recycling center behind from the camera's perspective, and on your right there, as we pan right, is the construction demolition transfer station that was built and opened in 2009. You can see the beginnings of our mural, and these are the sheds that are part of the recycling center that remove materials that we don't want in the landfill, paints and universal waste, which is comprised of things like batteries and compact fluorescent light bulbs. This is a shot looking south with the various recycling containers that you separate the materials, and there's refrigerators right there. And as we zoom in here, you'll see the guard shack where you're greeted by the attendants. We're open 7 days a week in the summer and 6 days a week the rest of the year. Here's a close-up of those sheds. They're redeemable cans that are maintained by the Little League, and waste oil can be brought here, paints, batteries, and Dorothy's, which is extremely popular, where you can bring in items that are usable, reusable, and someone would take them home, and that is a brand new Dorothy's replacing the old garage that lasted 20 years and was just tired. This area is a 4.5 acre parcel that will potentially be a leased area to a company that will do anaerobic digestion. They'll be placing that right there over the next couple of years if everything is approved, and that will be making gas that will be used to make electricity and providing revenue to the town well after the life of the landfill. And there's our baling facility where we process the recyclables we take from you currently. There's another shot of the recycling center with the textile bins for recycling. That's our old guard shack from 1990, believe it or not. And these are containers where people can bring in the demolition material that the residents generate, and of course the brush and yard waste that we process on site here. This is a shot of a tree that we planted in memory of Roland DuPont. It's a shot of the sign. Roland sadly passed away at a very young age, former selectman that was integral in the creation of ISWIM. This is where we process our gas from the landfill. We clean out the hydrogen sulfide so that we can provide it in a clean fashion for combustion. Right now we're combusting it, which reduces the effect on the environment. But we want to use that for electricity, and if the lease goes forward, we'll be selling that gas to the company that will lease the space I showed you earlier to make electricity, to buy the gas from us. We are replacing that flare that you saw with the one that you just saw there, the new one. This is a shot looking south, and this is phase 6. The green building you just saw is the DPW, which is being replaced, which is why we're building a new DPW. That building right there will remain, but this is the leachate tank where all the liquids from the landfill are collected and pumped out and sent to a treatment facility off-site. This is the current landfilling operation on top or into the space that was created by removing the old unlined landfill. Phase 4 is the name of that area now. It was Phase 1D previously, and that was about 250,000 cubic yards of material that were removed. And there's a long shot that shows the old the transfer station. Here's the cap of the landfill in the area between the two areas, the unlined and the lined. Looking northbound, you can see some wind turbines at the military base. To the north, paved paths, and then coming up is a nice shot of the sign that enters at the entrance. That's a nice quality sign that we had made, and here's the side-by-side shot that I mentioned earlier. Really shows the changes in time, an improvement in aesthetics as well as environmental protection. Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that trip down memory lane. I had a nice full head of hair back then, don't have it anymore, so this is evidence that life moves on. I have to just say that it's been an absolute honor and privilege to be involved with the town of Bourne in all of this as a volunteer. Later in the mid-90s, I was hired as a consultant to the Board of Selectmen to help plan the future. I then was a regional recycling coordinator for the state DEP, and the town of Bourne hosted me at the landfill, and then I became an employee of the town as an environmental manager, and now in my role as manager of facility compliance and technology development. It's just been absolutely a life-changing experience for me, and I can't thank the town of Bourne and the residents who have supported us over the years enough. It's been a lot of fun too, and as well as rewarding professionally. Those are some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you. Where do we go in the future? I'll just give you closing thoughts that some of the things we're looking at doing include upgrading to the next level of recycling. And what do I mean by that? Right now, residents separate by material at the curb various recycling items, recyclables we call it, into various categories. Plastic over here, glass here, metal cans over here, newspapers or fiber over here. We did that originally back in the late 80s because markets demanded high quality materials, and if we mixed materials, that would degrade the quality and increase the chance that it would not be recycled. Since then, as with any technology, such as your computer, your television, look how much it's advanced in the last 25 years, recycling has responded and created brand new recycling facilities whereby you can now put all those materials in one container, and that's called single stream recycling. And then they would automatically, with millions and millions of dollars of equipment, separate out the various fractions. The paper floats on special rollers into a separate stream. The glass falls through there and is crushed and used in different forms at a recycling facility that specializes in glass. The metal's pulled off with magnets. Aluminum cans have a different current that separates them. It's just absolutely fascinating what happens. And that is the wave of the future. There are many of these facilities in Massachusetts hungry for your recyclables. And collecting them in a single stream is easier for you. One container, one stop shopping, if you will. It's easier for the town to pick them up, and it's easier for the processors on that end. They have the equipment, and believe it or not, they're little electronic eyes with a light that can, with a puff of air, divert the different types of plastic into different grades. What that means for you is that we would be able to take number 3 through 7 plastics, which we have not taken, and other communities, as you may have heard from friends or relatives, do take that because they go to these single stream facilities. The reason that we don't is we process our own recyclables, and we don't have the staff or equipment to separate out the number 3 through 7 from the number 1 through 2, which are milk jugs and soda bottles, and if we had that contamination, we wouldn't be able to sell the material. These facilities are equipped for that, and we're looking at trying to convert the town to that system, and then instead of us bailing it, we would transfer it to these processors who would then do all of that work. What does that mean for the old baling facility? Well, we're looking at the possibility of recycling ash. The ash that comes to us, believe it or not, even though CMAS pulls metals out at their facility, there is more that they can pull out, including non-ferrous metals. Technology has developed over the years that there is ways of screening these materials out and recycling them. So we're looking at the possibility of converting the baling facility to recycle ash. As I mentioned earlier, behind the baling facility, if all is approved within the town leadership and it passes all the muster in terms of permitting, including the Board of Health approvals, we would have an anaerobic digester on that site for 25 years making renewable energy. Very, very fascinating. Those are some of the things that are being planned in the future, and technology, I can tell you, is rapidly changing, trying to extract more energy from different materials that traditionally have been thought of as waste materials. And we have a site that has positioned the town of Bourne to be able to host these types of operations and be on the cutting edge, believe it or not, in this industry, as well as providing revenue to the town. So there's more of a story to come. The site is going to continue to evolve. It's a fascinating story. You're part of that story. The kids in this town that I talk to along with the recycling committee are part of that story. They're the future, and what they see and participate in and actually encourage us to do is very, very important. It's a lot of fun for all of us out there. A lot of work goes into this. Many players over the years. If I've inadvertently left someone off, I apologize, but just again, thank you all the recycling committee members, past and present. Sue Carpenter was one of the original recycling committee members, Kurt Tykert, Dave Malarski, Alan McKay, Cindy Coffin, the health agent, her father, who helped with me video some footage that we've used over the years. Fascinating story. Of course, the selectmen, past, present, that have been involved. Our town administrator, Tom Garino, has been here with us now for many years. My boss, Dan Barrett, Asa Mintz, the operations manager. Other iSwim staff, Brent Goins, the general manager for 9 years at the facility. Just so many people to thank. And again, my personal thanks. And hopefully we'll have another anniversary video, maybe 10 years from now, 5 years from now, I don't know. But it's just another glimpse of a snapshot in time of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Thanks again for watching, and keep on recycling.